The night was heavy and cold. The alien prison stood in the middle of a lonely outpost, far away from any city or life. Its walls were made of black metal, sharp and strong inside. The air smelled of rust, oil, and fear. Shadows stretched along the damp corridors, and the only sound was the slow drip of water from a broken pipe. In one small cell, an alien girl named Lyra sat curled in a corner. Her skin was pale and bruised, her silver hair messy and tangled. She wore torn clothing that barely kept her warm. Chains hung from her wrists, heavy and cold. For weeks she had been here, locked away by the warlord soldiers. She was nothing more than a prize for them, a bargaining chip in a war she never wanted. Lyra had stopped counting the days. She no longer dreamed, she no longer hoped. Every day was the same. The guards would come, throw her a small piece of dry food, and leave without a word. Sometimes she could hear other prisoners in the distance, but one by one, their voices had faded into silence. Now she was the only one left, or at least it felt that way. The warlord who ruled this outpost was feared across the galaxy. He had no mercy for humans or for his own kind if they stood against him. Lyra had seen what he did to people who disobeyed. She had seen the cruelty in his eyes. She knew that once he was done with her, she would disappear forever. That night, a storm raged outside, rain hammered against the prison roof, and lightning flashed through the small barred window high above her cell. With every flash, the room lit up for a second, and she could see the stains on the walls. Thunder rolled like the growl of some giant beast, but then, something different happened. In the middle of the storm, there was a loud boom, louder than the thunder. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the ground trembled under her feet. Lyra froze, her heart racing. She had never heard an explosion like that here before. Shouts echoed through the corridors, alien voices yelling orders, boots pounding against the floor. Another explosion followed, closer this time, making the metal bars rattle. The lights flickered and then went dark, leaving her cell in complete darkness. She heard the sound of gunfire, sharp and fast, and then the deep growl of alien blasters. The noise was getting closer. Lyra crawled to the corner, not sure if she should hide or prepare to defend herself. Then, from the shadows beyond the bars, a figure appeared. It was not an alien soldier. It was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing black armor with a strange symbol on his chest. His helmet had a crack in the visor, and rainwater dripped from it. In his hands was a human pulse rifle, glowing faint blue at the edges. He stepped closer to the bars. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Lyra's heart pounded. She didn't know if this man was her savior or another kind of danger. The man reached into his belt and pulled out a small device. With a quick press, the cell lock sparked and hissed before unlocking with a click. "Come with me," he said in a deep voice. She shook her head, unsure. He stepped inside, looked at the chains, and pulled a tool from his side. In seconds, the chains snapped free, falling to the ground with a heavy clang. She rubbed her wrists, feeling the sudden lightness. "I can walk," she whispered, but her voice was weak without waiting. He took her arm gently and guided her out of the cell. The hallway was lit only by the red glow of emergency lights. Bodies of alien guards lay scattered on the floor, smoke rising from their armor. The man moved quickly, keeping her behind him. They turned corner after corner until they reached a metal door at the end of the corridor. When he opened it, the storm hit them full force. Rain poured down in sheets, the wind howled, and lightning split the sky. In the distance, Lyra could see small fires where the explosions had torn through the outpost walls. "Move!" he shouted over the wind. They ran through the mud, their boots splashing in deep puddles. She could hear alien voices shouting somewhere behind them. Growing closer, as they neared the edge of the outpost, a loud crack rang out. Lyra's eyes widened. A sniper shot had just missed them. The man didn't hesitate. He pushed her to the ground and turned, firing his rifle toward the distant rooftop. Another shot came, and this time he moved in front of her, taking the hit on his armor. The force knocked him back, but he stayed on his feet, grabbing her hand again. "Almost there," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. They reached a small hidden landing pad where a sleek human ship waited, engines already running. He helped her climb aboard before jumping in after her. The ramp closed, sealing out the storm. She collapsed into the nearest seat. Breathing hard, still unsure if she was safe, the man pulled off his helmet, revealing sharp blue eyes and a determined face. "My name's Ray," he said. "You're free now." Lyra stared at him, still unable to speak. Outside, the ship lifted into the stormy sky, leaving the prison and the warlord's outpost behind. For the first time in years, she felt the smallest spark of hope. The ship shook as it rose into the storm. Rain lashed against the hull, and lightning flashed across the clouds. Lyra gripped the seat tightly, her eyes darting from the cockpit to the dark sky outside. Ray's hands moved quickly over the controls, steady and confident, but his eyes kept checking the radar. "They're coming after us," he said calmly, as if it was an everyday problem. Through the small side window, Lyra saw the glow of alien pursuit ships lifting off from the outpost. Their red engines burned like angry eyes in the night. She felt her chest tighten. Freedom had lasted only a few minutes. Ray pushed the throttle forward, and the human ship shot higher into the clouds. The sound of the engines deepened, vibration humming through the metal floor. "You know how to use a safety harness?" Ray asked. Lyra shook her head, still trying to understand everything. He reached over and clipped her in with quick, sure movements. "Good. Stay low. Keep your head down," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. A warning light blinked red on the control panel. Ray's eyes narrowed. "They've locked weapons on us." An instant later, the ship jolted violently as enemy fire grazed the wing. The cabin filled with the sharp smell of burning metal. Lyra gasped, holding onto the seat straps. Her heart pounded as the ship swayed and shook. Ray spun the controls sharply, sending the ship diving through a gap in the clouds. The sudden drop made Lyra's stomach lurch. But below, she saw the dark outline of mountains, their jagged peaks hidden by mist. Ray guided the ship between the ridges, using the terrain to block the alien scanners. For a moment, the chasing ships vanished from sight. Lyra let out a shaky breath, but Ray didn't relax. "They're not giving up," he muttered. "They'll send ground units too." His words made her realize this wasn't over. She wasn't safe yet. They landed briefly in a hidden cave, just big enough for shore. The ship, the engines powered down, leaving only the sound of rain dripping from the rocky ceiling. Ray grabbed a black pack from under his seat and slung it over his shoulder. "Move fast, keep quiet," he told her, handing her a small flashlight. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Somewhere they can't follow," he replied. Without slowing down, they stepped out into the cold night. The ground was wet and slippery, and the air smelled of wet stone and moss. Lyra struggled to keep up. As Ray led the way through narrow passages, the beam of her flashlight caught strange alien markings carved into the cave walls. She wondered how old they were, but there was no time to ask. Halfway through the tunnel, Ray suddenly stopped and raised a hand. Lyra froze, listening. From the distance came the faint metallic echo of footsteps, too steady to be natural. "They're here," Ray whispered, his voice low but urgent. He pulled her behind a large rock and crouched low. Moments later, the dim light of alien search drones floated past, their red beams sweeping over the walls. Lyra held her breath, afraid even the sound of her heartbeat would give them away. Ray's hand rested lightly on his rifle. Ready to act, the drones moved on, their light fading into the dark. They continued deeper until the tunnel opened into a hidden valley. Above them, the storm had cleared just enough for a sliver of moonlight to touch the ground. Ray quickened his pace, leading her toward an old abandoned outpost built into the cliffs. Its metal doors were rusted, its power long gone. But it was shelter, and shelter was enough for now inside. Ray checked every corner before letting her sit down. He knelt beside her, handing her a small packet of water. She drank slowly, the cool liquid easing her dry throat. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice breaking. "Why risk your life for me?" Ray looked at her for a moment before answering. "Because you don't deserve to be in a cage," he said simply, before she could reply. The distant roar of engines filled the night air again. Ray stood up quickly, scanning the sky through a crack in the wall. "They found us," he said. He moved to the back of the outpost and pressed a hidden panel in the floor, revealing a narrow escape shaft. "Time to move again," he told her, offering his hand. Lyra hesitated for only a second before taking it. Something inside her had shifted. She no longer saw him only as a stranger. The human was risking everything for her, and she didn't even know his full story. But right now, trust was their only weapon. They slid down the escape shaft into darkness behind them. The sound of alien weapons tore through the abandoned outpost. Ahead, the cold wind of freedom called them onward. And somewhere in the shadows, the next part of their dangerous journey was waiting. The escape shaft opened into a narrow canyon. Cold night air brushed against Lyra's skin, carrying the scent of wet stone and wild plants. The sky above was dark but dotted with distant stars. Ray led her along a rocky path, his flashlight beam moving steadily ahead. They walked for what felt like hours until the sound of the alien engines faded completely. Finally, they reached a hidden landing site, tucked between two high cliffs. Ray's backup ship was waiting there, smaller than the one before, but sleek and fast. He helped her climb inside and sealed the hatch. The quiet hum of the engine replaced the storm and gunfire they had left behind. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, staring out at the empty sky. "You can rest now," Ray said, his voice calm. She shook her head. I can't close my eyes every time I do. I see that cage." Ray didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a small metal case from under the console and pulled out a medical kit. "Let me see your hands," he said. Her wrists were raw and red from the chains. He cleaned the wounds gently, the cool sting of the medicine making her flinch. "Sorry," he murmured. "It'll hurt less soon." For the first time since they met, Lyra studied his face in the dim cockpit light. He looked tired, more tired than she expected, but there was a steady fire in his eyes. "You didn't have to save me," she whispered. Ray glanced at her. "No one else was going to," he said simply. The words stayed in her mind, heavy and warm at the same time. Hours later, the ship dropped out of hyperspeed near a small green planet. It wasn't on any trade maps, hidden from most star routes. Ray landed in a valley filled with tall grass and glowing plants. The air was fresh, and the sound of water came from somewhere nearby. "This is safe ground," he told her. For now, they stepped out, and the night was alive with soft insect sounds and the gentle rush of a river. Ray guided her to a small shelter made from old starship parts. Inside, there was a bed made from thick blankets and a small heater glowing in the corner. Lyra sat down slowly, running her hands over the fabric. It felt strange to touch something soft after so many cold nights. Ray cooked a simple meal from ration packs, the smell filling the small space. He handed her a bowl, and she ate in silence, the warmth spreading through her body. When she finished, she looked at him, unsure of what to say. "You should sleep," he said, but she shook her head again. "What if they find us?" "They won't," he assured her. "I've covered our trail." Still, she couldn't relax completely. Every sound outside made her tense. Ray noticed, and without saying anything, he pulled a small blaster from his belt and set it beside her. "Just in case," he said. "If you hear danger, aim and pull the trigger." She hesitated before picking it up, the weight unfamiliar in her hands, but somehow, holding it made her feel a little stronger. Later, as the heater hummed softly, Lyra asked, "Why were you even near that prison?" Ray leaned back against the wall, his gaze distant. "I wasn't," he said. "I was passing through the sector when I intercepted a coded signal. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check it out. His eyes met hers when I saw you there. I couldn't walk away. Lyra's chest felt tight. She didn't remember the last time someone had chosen to help her without wanting something in return. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. Instead, she said, "I don't know how to be free anymore." Ray didn't smile, but his voice softened. "Then we'll figure it out together." That night, Lyra lay down for the first real sleep in weeks. Ray stayed awake, watching the doorway and listening to the night. When she stirred in her sleep, mumbling something in her alien language, he adjusted the blanket over her shoulders. Outside, the glowing plants swayed in the breeze. For now, the valley was quiet, but far away. In the deep reaches of space, the warlord's hunters were already plotting their next move. The morning in the hidden valley was calm. Soft sunlight broke through the mist, touching the grass with a golden glow. Lyra woke to the sound of birds singing, something she hadn't heard in a long time. For a moment, she almost forgot the warlord, the prison, and the chains. But then she saw Ray sitting outside the shelter, scanning the sky with a small device. His expression was sharp, focused. It wasn't the face of someone enjoying a peaceful morning. "They've been looking for us all night," Ray said without turning. Lyra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "How do you know?" she asked quietly. Ray handed her the device. On the screen, faint red dots moved slowly across a map of the surrounding system. "They're sweeping the area. It's only a matter of time before they get close." He stood, grabbing his rifle. "I want you to be ready," he said. "No more running without knowing how to fight." Lyra hesitated. "I've never fought before." Ray met her eyes. "You've survived. That's the first step. For the next few hours." He taught her the basics, how to aim, how to steady her breathing, how to stay low and use cover. Her hands trembled at first, but Ray's voice was calm and patient. "You're stronger than you think," he told her. By the time the sun was high, she could hit the center of a target at 20 paces. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The peace didn't last. In the late afternoon, a low hum filled the air. Ray's head snapped up. He knew that sound. "Drones," he said sharply. "Inside now." But before they could move, the first black metal scout ship appeared above the cliffs. Its red scanners swept across the valley, locking onto their position. Ray fired first, the pulse rifle's blue light flashing through the mist. The drone exploded in a burst of sparks, but the sound was enough to alert the others. More drones appeared, their engines whining like angry insects. "Stay behind me," Ray ordered. Moving toward the rocks for cover, Lyra followed, clutching the small blaster he had given her. Her heart pounded in her chest. A beam of red energy slammed into the ground near her feet. Burning the grass, she gasped but kept moving, diving behind a large stone beside Ray. "They're calling." "In reinforcements," Ray said quickly, pulling a small comm device from his belt. "We need to get to higher ground. Signal interference will help us disappear." They began moving along the cliffside, firing at drones as they went. Lyra managed to destroy one that swooped too close. The recoil shook her arms, but the rush of adrenaline pushed her forward. Then came the sound she feared most, the deep roar of a warship entering the atmosphere. Through the clouds, a massive black vessel descended. Its shadow covered the valley, and the ground shook under its weight. "That's a Hunter-class carrier," Ray muttered. "They brought the big guns." The warship deployed a squad of armored alien soldiers, their weapons ready. Ray and Lyra reached a narrow ledge above the valley, using the height to their advantage. "Pick your shots," Ray said. "Don't waste them." They fought side by side. Blaster fire flashing between the rocks, the soldiers tried to climb, but Ray's precise shots kept them back. One soldier broke through, charging straight at Lyra. Her hands shook as she aimed, but she remembered Ray's words, steady breathing. She fired, and the alien dropped at her feet. Her chest heaved, but she didn't freeze. She kept going. After what felt like hours, the warship began to pull back. Ray used the moment to grab Lyra's arm. We're leaving now. They ran along the cliff until they reached a hidden cave Ray had scouted earlier. Inside, the darkness swallowed them, the noise of the battle fading behind. Ray lit a small glow stick and looked at her. "You did well," he said, his voice softer now. Lyra sank against the cave wall, still breathing hard. "I was scared," she admitted. "Good," Ray said. "Fear keeps you alive, but you didn't let it stop you." Outside, the last echoes of the warship's engines faded into the distance. But they both knew this was not the end. The warlord would send more hunters, stronger ones, and the next battle would be even harder. For now, they rested in the darkness, Ray keeping watch, Lyra holding the blaster close. They were no longer just running. They were fighting back, and somewhere deep inside, Lyra felt the first spark of something dangerous to their enemies, hope mixed with defiance. The cave was silent except for the slow drip of water from the ceiling. Lyra sat close to the small heater Ray had set up, its faint warmth fighting the damp chill. She could feel her muscles ache from the battle, but her mind refused to rest. Ray was sitting across from her, cleaning his rifle with careful, steady movements. His eyes kept flicking to the cave entrance, always alert. After a long pause, Lyra spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "They won't stop," she said. "No matter where we go, they'll keep coming." Ray didn't look up. "You're right," he replied. "But there's more to this than you know," she frowned. "What do you mean?" Ray set the rifle down and leaned forward. "When I pulled you out of that cell, I thought you were just another prisoner, but I've been listening to their encrypted transmissions." His voice grew heavier. "They call you the last heir," Lyra's breath caught. The words hit her like a punch. She shook her head. "No, that's not possible." Ray didn't back down. "You need to tell me what it means." For a long moment, Lyra said nothing. Her gaze dropped to the cave floor, her fingers tightening around the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "My family ruled the northern colonies on my homeworld," she began. "We weren't soldiers. We were diplomats, protectors, the ones who kept peace between clans." Her throat tightened. "But when the warlord rose to power, he wiped out every member of my family, every friend, every guard." Her voice broke. "I was the only one who escaped, but they found me years later and locked me in that cell." Ray's eyes narrowed. "So you're more than just a prisoner. You're the rightful leader of your people." Lyra gave a bitter laugh. "Leader of nothing now," she said. "My people are scattered, afraid, and those who resist are hunted down." Ray leaned back, processing her words. "That's why they're chasing us so hard," he said. "If you live, you're a symbol. You're proof they didn't win." His gaze sharpened. "And people will rally behind you." Lyra shook her head. "No one will follow me. I'm broken. I spent years in a cage." Ray's voice rose slightly, not in anger but in conviction. "You fought beside me yesterday. You didn't run. You stood your ground. That's not broken." She looked at him, unsure if she believed his words. But the thought that her survival could mean more than just her own life settled deep in her chest. It was terrifying, but also it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. Before she could reply, Ray's cum device crackled to life. A distorted voice came through, speaking in a mix of human and alien tongue. "Resistance outpost to unknown vessel. Identify yourself." Ray's eyes lit up slightly. "It's the Resistance," he said. "I've been trying to reach them for weeks." Lyra's stomach nodded. "The Resistance? You mean people still fighting the warlord?" Ray nodded. "Scattered cells, moving in secret, hiding in asteroid fields, smuggling supplies. They're holding on by threads." He looked at her directly. "And with you, they could unite," she wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't ready for this. But then she remembered the faces of the people in the prison who never made it out. If she turned away now, their deaths would mean nothing. She clenched her fists. "Then we go to them," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Ray gave a small nod, but his expression stayed serious. It won't be easy. They'll double the bounty on your head. The warlord will send assassins, spies, everything he's got. Lyra's eyes hardened. Let him try. That night, as they prepared to leave the cave, Lyra stood at the entrance, looking out at the cold stars. For years, she had only seen them through bars now. They looked different, like they were calling her forward. Ray joined her, adjusting the straps on his gear. "Once we step out of here, everything changes," he said. She glanced at him. It already has. The heater's light faded as they powered down the camp. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow tunnel leading back to the cliffs. The shadows around them felt heavier now, not because of fear, but because of the weight of what was coming. Somewhere out there, in the dark reaches of space, the warlord's ships were moving. But now, Lyra was no longer just running. She was preparing to fight back. Asterisk, the resistance base was hidden inside the hollow shell of an asteroid. From the outside, it looked like nothing but frozen rock drifting through space. Inside, tunnels of steel and old ship parts formed a network of halls and rooms. Ray guided the ship into a narrow docking bay, where tired but determined faces watched them land. Lyra stepped out first, feeling dozens of eyes on her. Some whispered in surprise, others stared in disbelief. One older alien soldier stepped forward, his voice trembling. "It's true. The last heir lives." Lyra hesitated, unsure what to say. But Ray put a hand on her shoulder. "They need to hear your voice," he whispered. Before she could speak, alarms blared through the base. A voice shouted over the comms. "Multiple warlord ships inbound, heavy assault class." The resistance scrambled, grabbing weapons, sealing blast doors, powering up old turrets. Ray cursed it under his breath. "They must have tracked us here." Lyra's heart pounded. She could see fear in the eyes of the fighters. They were brave, but they knew the odds. If the base fell, the last safe haven for the resistance would be gone. Ray turned to her. "This is it. We hold here or we lose everything." For a moment, she wanted to run, to hide like before. But then she remembered the cage, the chains, the helplessness. She stepped forward, raising her voice so it echoed through the hall. "If we fall here, there will be no one left to fight," she said. "But if we stand together, we can break them." Her voice steadied. "The warlord thinks fear is stronger than hope. Let's prove him wrong." Room grew silent. Then one soldier shouted, "For the last heir." Others joined in, the sound swelling into a roar. Ray gave her a small nod. The moment had changed them all. The battle began with a thunderous explosion as the warlord's ships opened fire. The asteroid shook under the impact, dust falling from the ceiling. Resistance gunners returned fire, lighting the dark space with streaks of blue and red. Lyra stood beside Ray at the central defense console, relaying orders. Her voice was clear, her commands sharp. Enemy boarding ships crashed into the docking bay, their hulls cutting through the steel. The doors blew open, and armored alien soldiers poured in. Ray charged forward, firing in short, precise bursts. Lyra grabbed a rifle from the rack, her training from Ray echoing in her mind. She took cover behind a supply crate and fired, dropping 2 soldiers before they reached the control room. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burned metal. Sparks rained from broken panels, alarms blaring nonstop. A squad of enemies tried to flank the defenders, but Lyra spotted them through the haze. "Left side! Push them back!" she shouted, and the resistance fighters moved to block the breach. Ray fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Every shot he took was precise, every movement calculated. But the enemy kept coming, wave after wave. Then the ground shook. Harder than before, the warlord himself had arrived. His massive armored frame stepped through the wreckage, eyes burning with hatred. "So, the little heir thinks she can hide behind humans," he growled, his voice deep and cold. Lyra stepped out from cover, her rifle aimed at his chest. "I'm not hiding anymore," she said, her voice steady. The warlord laughed, but it was cut short when Ray fired, forcing him back. The fight turned brutal. The warlord's power was immense. His armor deflected most shots, and his weapon tore through cover like paper. But Lyra moved with purpose, guiding fighters, targeting weak spots in his troops. Finally, she spotted a crack in the warlord's chestplate. "Ray!" "There!" she called out, and together they focused fire with a final deafening blast. The warlord staggered, his armor cracking. Ray stepped forward, delivering the last shot that sent him crashing to the ground. The remaining enemy soldiers froze, then began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them. The base was scarred, smoke rising from every corner, but it still stood. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. Lyra lowered her weapon, her hands trembling. Ray walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said simply. She shook her head. "We did it." Around them, the resistance fighters gathered, their faces lit with something brighter than victory. Belief. Lyra knew this was not the end of the war, but it was the first real step toward taking back everything the warlord had stolen. Outside, the wreckage of enemy ships floated silently in the void, and for the first time in years, the stars seemed closer. The battle was over, but the echoes of it still lingered in the air. The resistance base smelled of smoke and scorched metal. Every corridor carried the marks of blaster fire and the deep dents from enemy weapons, but it also carried something new. Laughter. It was faint, tired, but real. The kind of sound that hadn't existed here in years. Lyra walked slowly through the damaged halls. Every fighter she passed gave her a nod, a smile, or a quiet "Thank you." It felt strange. She had been a prisoner for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to be respected. She was no longer just a survivor. She was the last heir, and her people now had someone to look to again. Ray found her standing at the docking bay, staring at the stars through the open shield gates. He walked up beside her, silent for a moment. "You're thinking about them," he said. She nodded. "My family, my people, everything I lost." Ray glanced at her. "You've given them something back. Hope." For a while, they stood there without speaking. The stars outside shimmered in the endless dark. Finally, Lyra turned to him, her voice softer. "You could have left me in that cell. You could have walked away," Ray smiled faintly. "And miss all of this?" He said, gesturing to the chaos and victory around them. "I didn't save you because I had to. I saved you because I wanted to." Her heart tightened at his words. So many people in her life had wanted something from her: power, wealth, influence. But Ray had only wanted her safe. Slowly she reached out, her hand brushing against his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then his fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. The days after the battle were filled with rebuilding. The resistance repaired their defenses, tended to the wounded, and gathered supplies from the wrecked warlord ships. But for Lyra, there was more to do than repair walls. She had to rebuild trust. She sent out messages to the scattered survivors of her people, calling them home. Some were hesitant, afraid the warlord's shadow still hung over them. Others answered at once, their voices trembling with emotion when they heard hers. Weeks later, the first refugee ships arrived. When Lyra greeted them at the docking bay, children ran to her. Holding her hands, elders bowed their heads, tears in their eyes for the first time. She felt the weight of her title, not as a burden, but as something she could carry. Ray stayed close through it all. He never took the credit, never stepped into the spotlight, but whenever she turned, he was there, in the planning rooms, on guard at the gates, or simply sharing quiet moments when the noise of leadership grew too heavy. When the resistance finally secured a small, peaceful planet for resettlement, Lyra and Ray stood at the edge of a wide green valley. The air smelled of flowers and fresh rain. "This is where we start over," Lyra said, her voice filled with something new certainty. Ray glanced at her. "A home," he said simply. She smiled. "Our home." They built a small house at the valley's edge. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. The walls were strong, the roof kept out the rain, and the windows opened to a view of the stars. At night, they would sit outside, watching the constellations. Lyra would point out the ones from her homeworld, telling their stories. Ray would listen, his arm resting around her shoulders. The galaxy was still dangerous. The warlord's loyalists were out there, waiting for a chance to rise again. But here, in this quiet place, they had carved out something worth fighting for, not just survival, but life. Together, one evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet, Lyra leaned against Ray and whispered, "When I was in that cell, I used to dream about being free. But I never imagined this." Ray smiled. "Neither did I." She looked at him, her silver hair catching the last light of day. "I love you, Ray," she said, her voice steady. He squeezed her hand. "I love you too, Lyra." The stars began to shine above them. They sat in silence, the cool night air wrapping around them like a promise. And in that moment, the past no longer had chains. The future was open, wide, and full of light.